Welcome back to Garden Party, everybody. We're your virtual series from the Southern California News Group, here to give you tips, tricks, and insights into getting the most joy and productivity out of your gardening experience, and also maybe help you find a community of like-minded green thumbs or wannabe green thumbs. In my case, I'm Sam Dunn. I'm the senior editor for premium content here at the Southern California News Group. First, I have to say thank you to all of our Reader Rewards subscribers for supporting our virtual programs. Thank you so much. And by the way, if you are a Reader Rewards subscriber attending today, you're automatically entered to win a $100 gift certificate to Home Depot. Last month's winner was Barbara Stapp, so congrats, Barbara. We hope you're enjoying that. And listen, if you are not a subscriber to one of our papers, why not? Go to scng.com/subscribe to find your local paper and join us as a regular reader and supporter of local journalism. Let me see. Before we get started, there are a few things to know. If you have questions, and we hope you do, use the Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Questions are going to be addressed at the end of the presentation, so please know that that will come at the end. But certainly, if you want to make comments along the way, use the chat feature found on your Zoom toolbar as well. Keep in mind you'll have slides to refer to as you go, and this session will be videotaped and a link will be sent to you so you can share or just revisit some of your favorite moments, and you're not going to miss a thing. It's also posted at scng.com/virtual events, and that's where you can find all of our past virtual shows as well as see what's coming up. Now it is my extreme pleasure to introduce our longtime gardening columnist, Laura Simpson, with today's presentation. Laura, please take it away.
All right, thank you. So let me
Welcome.
share my screen here. So you can see, oh no, we don't want this one. There we go. Okay, because everyone see my pretty pictures? There we go.
Yep, it's up, Laura.
Okay, just want to make sure before I start and go on, and I was going to wait. I can't see anything. Okay, so like she said, I'm Laura Simpson. I've been a master gardener since 2002, which is a long time. I have a platinum badge, which means I have over 2,500 volunteer hours with the Master Gardener program. I'm also a master food preserver. So if you want to know anything about food preservation, you can also write me in my column. I can give you hints on how not to kill your family with your canning. So let's just, okay, I live near Temecula, California. I come from the world of medical research. I did work in monoclonal antibodies, oncology, things like that. And I've been a gardening columnist for the Southern California News Group for about 5 years, I guess now. So not as long as Toots Beer was, but I'm getting there. So the Master Gardener program, which is what I'm a part of, we bring research-based knowledge and information on horticulture, pest management, sustainable landscape practices. So we want to, whatever I tell you as a master gardener is what's coming like straight from the University of California. It's research-based. And as such, we can't do any endorsements, things like that. So you know, if you ask, well, what product can I use on my landscape? I might kind of sound kind of cagey in my answer because I can't really recommend like a specific brand usually. So just to know that it's because of the rules of the Master Gardener program. So today we're talking about native plants. And these are kind of the topics I wanted to touch on: why to grow native plants, what a Mediterranean climate actually entails, a little bit about soils and watering, how and when to plant. That makes a big difference as far as your success. Maintenance as well. And then a little bit on pests and weeds because, well, we have to take the bad with the good, I guess. So why plant native plants? Well, there's a lot of benefits to that. They're really quite pretty. They a lot of the California natives have some really vibrant colors to them. So you can get a really snazzy looking garden if you plant a lot of flowering natives. The maintenance is going to be a lot easier than if you're trying to reproduce, say, you know, a perfect bluegrass lawn from Massachusetts or something. you know, these are plants that are tough and they can take the heat, they can take the dry air, they can take some of the alkaline soil. So they're they're tough for the most part. It also saves resources when you're not pouring a ton of water on grass to try and keep it green. That's always a good thing. It's saving money is also helpful. It provides habitat for a lot of the local animals like you know, hummingbirds and butterflies and things like that. And it gives you a sense of place, which, you know, something that's unique to our environment. You can't grow, a lot of times you can't grow these plants, you know, anyplace else. So take advantage. So the beauty is there's all sorts of different kinds of colors and textures. I mean, we're talking native plants and tails, not just flowers, but trees, um, um, native grasses, things like that, succulents. And so succulents are especially like agaves, really provide the year-round interest. Because I mean, you know, all the flowering plants, most of them don't really do a lot in the winter time. So like right now, it's kind of the ugly season. But if you have something like, you know, really cool agave or, you know, something that gives you some structural interest, even like an interesting looking tree that's lost its leaves, but it has a really cool branch structure, then that, you know, it gives you some interest in the fall, in the winter. Um, these are healthy plants adapted to our climate. They're not going to be struggling with the heat and the wildlife that it brings in, particularly butterflies. It's just really cool to see all the pretty birds that show up because there's been some really cool visitors in our we have a few native plants in our front yard, and so it's kind of fun to watch the hummingbirds fight over the sage. watching the watching different kinds of butterflies show up, it's really kind of neat to see. Also, once it's established, I always have to put this caveat in, once it's established, it is less maintenance. I mean, you don't have to mow every week. Um, it's heat tolerant, drought tolerant, and you're going to have somewhat less pest pressure because when a plant is stressed from being planted in the wrong environment, it sends out chemical signals, and that kind of invites all the pests to come in and have a feast. So when your plants are less stressed because they're in their native environment, then this decreases your pest pressure quite a lot. Of course, resources. This is Lake Mead, I believe on the left here. You know, where they're finding a lot of bodies of people that got killed by the mafia start showing up as the lake was receding. And of course, on the right is when it's filled up. So you can see our water situation in California is, I okay, it sounds is very fluid, right? I mean, we have like a lot of rain, then we have drought, and then a lot of rain and drought. So we don't have like a steady supply of water. So it's best to save what we can. Also, you're using less fertilizer. These plants don't usually need a lot of fertilizer. This is good for the groundwater to not have a lot of nitrogen trickling down into the groundwater or into the lake water and stuff. Also less pesticides because of course the less pest pressure. Provides a habitat for hummingbirds. And with the less pesticide use, that's less harmful to the wildlife as well. Attracts beneficial insects, which of course then eat the pest insects. So that's also pretty swell. And provides shelter for hummingbirds and things. Hummingbirds like to build their cute little cup-like nests in a lot of native bushes and stuff. So it's kind of cool to see, to find a hummingbird nest, just like really neat. And of course, I like this photograph and to say it gives you a sense of place. So you can take a photograph of your garden with all the beautiful flowers and post on Facebook and say to your friends who aren't in California, you know, neener, especially especially in the wintertime and everything's covered in snow. Okay, so what's a Mediterranean climate? You've probably heard this term a lot. Um, obviously, as it's the climate that's around the Mediterranean basin, right? South of France, Spain, Portugal, all that. It's moderated by Mediterranean Sea. Um, but also you can see in Chile, of course, California, Baja California, up the coast, South Africa, and Southwest Australia. So plants that a lot of times you'll see plants sold like alongside California natives that come from these climates because they all have very similar climates to us. And that entails long, hot, dry summers where there's hardly any rainfall in the summer, obviously. Cool, wet winters, which is kind of what we're experiencing this week, right? All of our rainfall comes in the winter. And then the two challenges are fire and wind, um, particularly in Australia and California, but other places too. Um, California has we have a microclimates. Now, when you talk about like when you're looking at a plant label and it says it's good for sunset zone, whatever, zone 9 or whatever, that we have, I think out of 24 climate zones, California contains like 18 or 20 climate zones. It's a very diverse environment here, as opposed to like, Minnesota or North Dakota. Very, it's all the same climate. So we have microclimates, and so this would involve like heat sinks, which would be like a pond like this, a body of water, stones, rocks, pavement. It's all heat sinks. It absorbs heat from the sun in the in the daytime and then radiates it out at night. This means that the nighttime low temperatures won't be quite as low in areas where there's a heat sink. Also, urban heat islands. Um, you see a lot of that, especially in areas where it's being developed, where you're having a lot of houses being built, where it used to be farmland. And so, one of the things that they'll say, oh, the temperature at this spot here is 5 degrees hotter than it was 10 years ago. However, you're not comparing apples with apples because that spot, let's say 10 years ago, it was in the middle of a field, and now it's in the middle of a housing development where there's concrete and there's houses. And so all those structures are heat sinks, and it causes a heat island effect. And so that also brings the low temperature, the winter low temperatures up higher. Orientation, the north or east facing side of your house or your property is going to be cooler in the winter than the south or west facing side, just because of the sunlight exposure during the day. And of course, topology would be if you live at the top of a hill, then the cold air that comes in is going to fall away from your property. And alternatively, if you live at the bottom of a hill, your winter lows are going to be a little cooler because all that cold air ends up falling down where you are. So there's all these things and it may be just a few degrees difference, but it's in that range that makes a big difference because it's right around 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So that range, it makes a big difference as far as what you can grow, because there's a lot of plants that will not grow where there's any frost. And then here's another thing with the climate zones. So you may have heard like USDA climate zones, those are only based on winter minimum temperatures. So for the rest of the country, that's probably good enough to go by that. And then, but sunset zones, they're much more granular. And so if you look at a Sunset Western Garden book, and it has very detailed maps as to what zone, um, you know, you could be a zone 9, and some across town, it might be a zone 8. So sunset zones they're much more detailed, and it's also based on, summer maximum temperature, the length of the growing season, and the amount of rainfall you get. And then here's another. I was going to post a picture of the sunset garden zones, but they wanted me to pay. So I found this Arbor Day Foundation zone just to give you an idea, and you can see this is kind of this is more in line with the USDA climate zone. So you can see, the purple is the god awful cold areas where it stays cold through like early June. And then you have the pink areas, which are all the expensive areas to live. But look at California, it does have quite a few colors, anywhere from 10 degrees to 0 degrees, the yellow parts there. So those would be like the high desert, the Hesperia gets really quite cold. And of course, Northern California will get quite cold. But in the Southern California area, I mean, just in the southern like third of California, you can see there's quite a few different climate zones there. And that's due to our mountains and things like that. So soils, we have decomposed granite. This is something that's kind of, well, it's unique to desert areas, but we kind of are in a desert, frankly. Decomposed granite is basically very, very fine gravel. It has like no nutrient value, but it does have a tendency to drain pretty fast. We also deal with super compacted soil. That was mostly due to the construction requirements here, where if you see like a new development going in or a new shopping center where there wasn't anything before, they bring in heavy equipment and they drive back and forth like all day long. They're spraying water, driving this heavy equipment back and forth. They have to compact the soil down to 10 feet so that if the big earthquake comes, the ground does not liquefy and swallow up the houses. So this is a good thing, but it's not really fun to garden in. We have alkaline soil as opposed to acidic soil. It's much more like limey, I guess you'd say. It has a high pH. Alkaline soil has a tendency to bind up iron. So you can have like iron deficiency in your plants due to the high pH of the soil. So that's something, if you're struggling with plants, trying to keep them green and you keep pouring nitrogen on them, but that's not working, consider it might be a iron deficiency due to the alkaline soil binding up the iron and making it not available to plant roots. And our soil is definitely deficient in organic matter. Basically, that's the definition of decomposed granite. Looks like no organic matter. But natives will do okay. They will grow in that soil. Watering, there's a difference of opinion amongst the native plant experts. A lot of native plants experts insist that sprinklers is the way to go because it imitates natural rainfall. I, being lazy, don't like to pull weeds all the time. I like the drip system because it limits the amount of weeds you get because it's delivering water right to the plant that you want it to go to. But when you're establishing a native plant garden or a native landscape, you may want to start with sprinklers to get them established and get those roots growing out. And then later on switch to a drip system so you're not watering weeds. So deciding what to plant. This is always a tricky thing. You want to try and aim for year-round interest. I've seen a number of landscapes where I can kind of tell exactly what week of the year they put their landscape in, because maybe 2 weeks out of the summer it looks spectacular. Everything's in bloom, it's gorgeous. But then the rest of the summer it's just kind of blah. So you want to avoid this. There's native plant like bloom calendars. A number of nurseries they will probably have these on their websites, and it'll tell you like this plant will bloom in early spring, this plant will bloom like later fall. So you want to kind of mix it up so you have something in bloom all summer long, right? Do your research, know how big some of these plants get, and they may have specific needs. And aim to put your landscape in October and November. You want to do it more late October, early November. This is after the heat has subsided. Don't put baby plants in the ground in July. That's just mean. So you don't want to be out there working in the garden, digging a hole in 110-degree heat. That plant does not want to be put in that hole in 110-degree heat. So wait, go shopping, make a list, and then plant everything later on, in the fall. Costly mistakes. This plant here in my slide, this is Pride of Madeira. It's a beautiful plant. I call it a Caltrans plant because it gets like 15 feet tall. I mean, absolutely enormous. I had a neighbor who lived across the street from me at my old house, and she had gone plant shopping, and they had Pride of Madeira in these little 1-gallon pots, and they looked kind of cool. The leaf structure was really neat, and she knew they had beautiful blue flowers, so she bought a half dozen of them and put them in her front yard. and and in about a year or so, she had to hack them all out because they basically buried her house, because these are very, very big plants. So something that might look cute and innocent in a 1-gallon pot, do your research, make sure it doesn't get like really huge. And one thing that's nice is, you can pull it up on your phone. When you're right there in the nursery, you can pull it up and say, should I buy this or should I not? And it's like, oh, I better not buy this. So you can save yourself some money, especially a lot of these plants they're getting expensive anymore. Yeah, keep a notebook or, just on your phone, take photographs of stuff. Also look at the invasive species list, because there's a lot of that list keeps changing. They keep adding stuff to it. And so something that is sold alongside like the water-wise plant section of Home Depot or whatever, they oftentimes will have plants that are actually invasive because they didn't get the word yet. Measure your space. Know how much room you have. So when a plant says it gets like 10 feet across, I mean, if that's half your front yard, you may not want to buy that plant. So those are all, believe me, I've made those mistakes. This one, this Mexican feathergrass, you'll see if you Google like California native landscapes, you'll see this plant in there a lot. This is now considered an invasive species because the seeds will blow and get everywhere. So that's something to avoid. And they're still being sold in the nursery as well. Pampas grass. I think we all remember pampas grass. It was like the big thing in the 2000s, maybe 1990s. Seemed like everybody had pampas grass, and they've kind of, I don't see it sold too much anymore. It's a god awful invasive plant. You don't want to grow it. It has like leaves. The edges are like a saw blade, so it's really awful to try and trim back. If it catches fire, it explodes and throws sparks everywhere. Just not a friendly thing to have in your yard. Scotch broom is one that I see a lot. That has the very bright yellow cheery flowers. That ends up getting very ratty looking, and the seeds get everywhere, and it grows like on slopes and stuff, and then it chokes out any native plants. So Scotch broom is definitely an invasive, and there's some ice plant species as well that you used to see ice plant everywhere, along the freeway, slopes and stuff. Used to see ice plant. Not so much anymore because it's considered invasive. So these are just a few of the invasive species, but definitely want to check that out. California invasive species list. So, oops, I jumped ahead. Okay, so designing with natives, where you're trying to decide where things should go. So things to look at on your property are going to be drainage issues, you want to make sure that your property has good drainage, not just to keep the water away from your house, from your foundation, but also these natives won't do well in a where there's a puddle of water, halfway through the winter. Look at the path of water runoff. So you can maybe put in like a dry stream bed. That's always a very popular option. And then put plants alongside that helps suck up that extra water. So look at where your swale is. Know if it's pet friendly. There's some native plants that are poisonous, or if they have prickles or spines, then you're not going to want to put those near a walkway or a pathway. If you have kids, especially, you want to avoid some of the more prickly plants that are out there. If there's if you need to have shade somewhere, you want to have a spreading tree maybe near the front door, so your front door is a shadier spot. Know about fragrances, good or bad. There's a lot of native plants that smell very nice, and then there's some, particularly some of the sages, they kind of smell nice when you brush up against them, and then like a minute later they smell like cat pee. So you have this experience where it's like, ooh, and then ew. So if you have a plant that does that, if you notice some of the sage, like I think white sage is like that. But if you have a plant that you like, but it does that, well, maybe put it where you can see it, but not brush against it, or far enough away that you're not going to smell it, especially like away from a window. And then plan for the ugly season, which would be look for trees that have an interesting branch structure or cool looking bark. Once again, like agaves, some of the succulents look good in the wintertime. So, plan for that too. Of course, there's still going to be maintenance. Nothing, I mean, it might be low maintenance, but never no maintenance. So you're still going to have to weed, deadhead, cutting off the dead flowers and stuff. At the end of the season, you'll want to divide once they get big enough. If you have a clumping perennial and it stops flowering, usually it's a sign that it needs to be dug up and divided, because the roots get crowded, that will stop producing flowers. Pruning's also good, just to keep the plant healthy. And never overwater, and in general, do not fertilize. They don't like, if you fertilize some of these native plants, they're just going to get really big and rangy and just not that good looking. And of course, there's always going to be pests as well, but not quite as much as, say, with a vegetable garden. So you'll always have like aphids and scale insects. For those, I just recommend like using the hose and on jet and blasting those guys off of there. Grasshoppers, those are super destructive. They just like come through and then leave. If you do have like an invasion of grasshoppers and you want to protect your plants, the only thing you really can do is like row covers or something to wrap your plants up. There's nothing really that kills grasshoppers. Cats like to eat them, but I mean, when you have an invasion of grasshoppers, the cats can't keep up. Gophers, of course, are an ever-present pain in the butt in California. And caterpillars, which, if you're going to have a butterfly garden, for instance, you're going to have caterpillars. So you don't want to kill every caterpillar you see. You might want to leave the caterpillars. Plus, some of them are kind of cool looking anyway, so usually they're not too destructive. So with weeds, of course, when you have mulch, you're going to have weeds. I mean, one thing why grass lawns are so popular is because grass has very dense fibrous roots, and it could a healthy lawn can outcompete weeds pretty well. When you have a native landscape, especially before it all fills in, you have a lot of basically empty space, right? So you're going to have like grass like this here invading into your landscape. So some of the ways to control it is, of course, the drip irrigation, applying mulch, which would be like bark chips. Don't use the colored bark chips. Just use the natural bark chips. You can even like get in touch with some of these tree trimming companies that have tree trimming that they chip. A lot of times you can get them to dump that on your driveway, and you can use that. You can mulch nice and thick. That helps protect the surface roots as well. Then when you once they're established, you want to go with infrequent but deep watering, and where you would just like, if you have a drip system, you would want to run it for a fairly long time, but not too frequently, because you want that water to go down where your good roots are, and not on the surface where all the weed seeds are. And please don't use weed cloth or plastic. It's a terrible idea. It looks terrible. It ends up pulling up through the mulch. Weeds will grow through it anyway, and it disintegrates, and just it's a god awful mess. And once you put it down and put mulch over it, you're going to end up having to pull the mulch away and remove the weed cloth or plastic anyway. So just don't start, but just don't use it. So with your own interest, the way to find out like how you would pick plants for your own interest, there's so many botanical gardens. Your water district probably has a demonstration garden. I think almost all of them do. And they'll have the plants labeled, hopefully accurately. A lot of them have little flyers, or they have a QR code. You can pull it up, and then it'll help you identify the plants and tell you about them. So the botanic gardens and demonstration gardens, also some fire departments do have demonstration gardens as well, more for fire escaping, but there'll be a lot of native plants there. And then take notes. If you snap a picture with your phone, it'll date stamp it, so you'll know like, oh, this is in bloom. I took this picture in April, so it blooms in April. Always research before buying. It's such a temptation to pick up some beautiful plant and bring it home, and then you find out it's really not appropriate for your space. And like I said, some of these plants are like $30 or some now. So you want to really know what you're bringing home. Sometimes I have friends who swear by like a calendar where they have like a date planner, and then they keep notes. They write down their notes that way. So things like flower colors, textures that look, what looks good when it's not flowering. Does it have a cool texture or something? Does it have neat branches? Does it have nice bark or whatever? And then also the size, how big does this get, and how fast does it grow? So a little bit about native trees. They provide habitat, of course. A lot of them provide early season interest. A lot of them will flower quite early in the spring before anything else is out. So that's always nice to, right, in February, seeing pink flowers out there is kind of nice. Native trees also adapted to our climate, so they're gonna send out roots. They're gonna spread roots and tolerate our soil. I always recommend buying relatively small. Don't buy the big box trees. The box trees more likely are to have they'll have circling roots, where the roots will be in the shape of box. I've seen big trees that have blown over after after a heavy rain, and then the wind comes through and it blows over these big box trees, and the root comes up in the shape of a box. I mean, it's just remarkable. Those roots don't venture out past the shape of the box. But if you get something smaller, you're more likely to be able to spread those roots out when you plant it and have a healthier tree that won't fall over and smush your car. So here's a few. This is by no means is this an all-inclusive list. These are some of my favorite ones. The California buckeye. I do tours at the UC Riverside Botanic Garden. We have a buckeye tree there, and the grade schoolers come through, and I had a little boy say it looks like tube socks stuck in the tree. So it has these cool inflorescences, right? But one thing that's interesting about this tree is that it loses its leaves and when the summer gets really hot, it drops all of its leaves. And then when the rain comes, it starts leafing out. So it's kind of an opposite tree. I wonder what it would do in Australia. But the white flowers show up early in the spring, and then it has these big round seed pods that are like they look like deer eyes. So it's where they get the buckeye from. Ceanothus, also known as California lilac, grows as a small tree or a shrub. It can spread quite a lot. It's nice for like on a hillside or something. There's many varieties. There's different varieties of where there are different shades of lilac, but very pretty. The butterflies love them. Western redbud. This one too is really showy. Just really, when it gets big like this, it's just spectacular. Once the flowers drop, a lot of them have a red foliage, so it has that color through the summer. And it's a relatively small tree. It's not going to get huge, so um, it's a nice specimen tree for like a small front yard. Desert willow. This is not a willow. If you have like a low spot in your yard and you thought, well, I could put a willow here, don't put this tree. It's not related to willow. It's just called a willow because of the shape of the leaves that look like a willow. It's really heat tolerant, but it's cold tolerant down to 10 degrees. So this is one that does really well, like in the high desert too. And these really kind of almost sweet pea looking flowers on it. It's very pretty. And you can see the multi-trunk structure there. So it gives them interest that way too. I saw a California oak for sale at Lowe's. I just had to kind of laugh because these trees get very, very, very big. If you have 100 acres, yeah, go for it. But they they don't do well as transplants. They have like when the acorn drops, it sends a really, really deep taproot because it taps into the water table below. You'll see these trees grown like near stream beds and stuff where there's water, groundwater. Um, but yeah, absolutely enormous. A beautiful tree, but yeah, even though if they sell it at Lowe's, doesn't mean that you should put it in your yard. So don't be tempted. Now, a toyon, this one's a nice tree. This well behaved. It doesn't grow too fast. Also known as Christmas berry. It attracts waxwings, really kind of a cool looking bird in the wintertime. Um, so it's called Christmas berry because the berries show up like in December. Usually this is grown as like a multi-trunk tree. My kids love to, we had a couple of toyons in the park near us, and my kids love to climb on the branches and just kind of sit up there because the branches are kind of, diagonal. So it's a good place for a kid to sit and, watch the world go by. But yeah, this one's a nice one too. That's well behaved. Manzanita, this probably would be better in like a drier type climate. Multi-trunk, it has beautiful red bark, a very, very hard wood. That's what they make like parrot perches out of is manzanita wood. Um, but it's a very tough tree and also would afford some winter interest due to the bark structure and everything. So on shrubs and succulents and perennials, there's an enormous number of shrubs, succulents, and perennials. I'm just going to touch on a few. There's a number of ornamental grasses that are very, very well adapted. A lot of them smell good, and they are very attractive to hummingbirds and butterflies. So Cleveland sage, one of my favorites. This one has like these weird little pom-pom like flowers. Very fragrant, and this one to me it doesn't smell like cat pee. My husband says it smells like cat pee, but I like the smell of it. It attracts butterflies, particularly the painted ladies. Really hardy, just and there's different varieties now. They've been doing some breeding work, so there's all these different varieties of Cleveland sage that have more they have darker flowers and more blue rather than purple flowers and stuff. So that's worth checking out. Monkey flowers, another one where they have many different varieties, yellow or orange flowers. Then I've seen them with even red. They are kind of sticky. Like the stems have like a sticky type texture. So something you might not want to put like right next to your path or anything. But those are like the little cheery flowers. Blue-eyed grass. This is an iris relative. You can see these like in the native plant section of the nurseries. They are kind of small. So they have the attractive like grass, bunch. They look like a bunch grass almost, but then they put out these little blue flowers or purple flowers. Just really attractive and well-behaved plant. Penstemon, another one that has like lots of varieties. These tubular flowers that you see are very attractive to hummingbirds. One word of caution: when you go out to deadhead your penstemon or your sages, anything that the hummingbirds like to visit, they will come up and try to intimidate you. They'll get right in your face, and their pointy little beaks right next to your nose. It's kind of alarming. You hear this kind of a humming sound, and you look, and there's this bird like glaring at you. But yeah, they get kind of proprietary about their flowers. This is a short-lived perennial, but you can save the seeds as the flowers fade. You'll notice like a little black seed form in there, and you can save the seeds and replant them. Agave, this one's a nice one for winter interest. Some of these can get really, really, really big. Another one you don't want to put near a sidewalk or something because the tips have these little pointy ends on there. So if you got someplace you don't want people walking, that's a good place. It's a good plant. But it's good for winter interest. Look out, like if it's putting out a flower spike, it means it's getting ready to die. So don't buy an agave if it's got a flower spike on it. It's fixing to die. However, if you plant one, what'll happen is it'll put off pups. It'll put off little babies near the base. And so by the time it does put up that flower spike, if it's in the ground, you'll usually have like 5 or 6 pups that you can cut away from the main plant and have more agave to give away or plant. There is a lot of native succulents, just an enormous number of them. They make really cool ground covers. I have a friend who teaches a class on how to make wreaths and stuff with the succulents, and it's not my thing, so I don't know that much about them. But you can find like just an enormous number of shapes and colors and stuff, and most of them are like the low growing ones that are nice for ground cover. You put one, and you can cut this off like at the stem. You can cut it off and then stick the stem in the ground, and they're really easy to propagate. So it's worth finding somebody who has these plants and they can get free plants. Native grasses, yes, be careful with the invasive species list. There's a number of grasses that have been used in the landscape quite extensively and now are on the invasive species list. Deergrass is not one of them. Deergrass right here, this one is like a real fine fine blade, big poofy bunching grass. It's um, the Native American tribes use that for making these fantastic baskets. They can weave the the leaves very tightly and make baskets that are actually waterproof. So it's just kind of a cool plant just on its own.
Hey,
So,
Laura, just
and
so
then
you
we're done.
know, we're almost at the end, right? Because
Yeah, this is it. I know you're gonna get out the hook and play. But those are my resources. And also I wanted to put a plug in for any, if you're interested in native plants. Well, the California Native Plant Society has like local chapters, of course. But also just your native, just your local garden clubs. You can find out a lot about what grows in your area just by joining a garden club and get free plants a lot of times. So it's worth checking that out too. But
big
yeah, here's my
plants.
yeah. So here's my source list. So
Well, that is fantastic. Remember, everybody, you're going to get a copy, a link to this presentation, so you're not going to miss any of this information. We do have a few questions for you, Laura, and I wanted to hit them before we leave.
sure.
We had quite a few for ground cover suggestions. One from Irene Chen says she has an area under pine trees that the ground is very hard. She wants to know if you have suggestions for native cover there, and also a suggestion for ground cover that can tolerate being walked on, and another question about ground cover that grows up hills. Anything to say about those?
Okay. So for the hill, if you are looking for something to stabilize the hill, you're worried about erosion, which is a common concern. I would go with native grasses, native bunch grasses, because those fibrous roots really hold the soil fast. Um, so look at the different. There's many different kinds of deer grass is not the only one. There's many different kinds of native grasses. So I would go for a slope. I would go with the native grass route. Let's see, underneath a pine tree, the thing there is that there's a lot of shade, and so most of my ground cover favorites would not grow well in shade. Um, there's very few plants that would grow that would grow in like a moist shade. The only thing I can think of, or very few plants that can grow in dry shade. The only plant I can think of that environment would be aloes, but even then they may not do well under a pine tree. So usually the shade from the tree would be enough to keep anything else from growing there. And then what was the other one? A ground
Uh,
cover that can be walked
tolerate
on.
being walked on. Yeah.
Okay. There's a UC Verde buffalo grass. It's a buffalo grass that was developed for California. We actually have a UC Verde lawn. And it can take some foot traffic. It's not like you can't like, you're not going to be able to play a football game on it or something. But the the buffalo grass UC Verde, which I've seen sold in flats like at Armstrong and stuff. Um, but that one's pretty tough, and that's a grass, and it it'll form a thick turf,
Great.
and yeah, that one's nice. But yeah, most ground covers are not going to be very foot traffic friendly. I mean,
Okay.
there's like verbenas and stuff, but you really don't want to walk on them. They don't
Okay.
like.
Sorry, we've just got a few more minutes and we have a ton of questions. Kendall In wants
Oh
to know, can you
goodness.
still plant in mid-February?
Yes, but beware that we sometimes get very early heat waves. And so just be aware of that. So you may not want to go all out. I mean, we planted a few perennials just this week because of the rain. Um, but you're getting close to uh, uh the time of year when you don't want to really plant new stuff. You want to wait until the winter time. And when you're planting stuff in the wintertime, it may look like it's not doing anything, but it's actually forming like a lot of roots. There's a lot of stuff going on underground that you don't see. So, you think maybe what difference does it make? It's not doing anything. It actually is doing a lot. It's forming a lot of roots and establishing itself during the wintertime. So that's why we suggest winter planting.
Sounds good. We
Yeah.
have a question. Where can we find a list of invasive species? Did we mention?
You can Google like California invasive species, invasive plant council or something. There's also Plant Right, which is like an organization that they go and they try to encourage garden centers to not sell invasive species. So that would be a source there.
Okay,
But yeah,
one more
just Google it.
question. I'm sorry, we're almost out of time.
Oh
Cindy
no.
wants to know, is it okay to use cardboard versus weed cloth?
Yes, actually, I have a couple Master Gardener friends that will use corrugated cardboard from their Amazon, boxes. They lay them down and then they put mulch over top. That works good because the cardboard actually like melts and becomes part of the soil. So that is fine. Don't use weed cloth though. But
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
well, I lied. One more question because I
Okay.
think it's relevant to everyone.
Yeah.
This is from Carol Sheridan, wants to know, do you recommend following the Irvine District watering recommendations if you're in Irvine, or any of the watering recommendations from your water districts?
Yeah, I would go with them. They have people who that is their lifeblood, is they they measure like how much water you should put on your lawn. But when you're establishing, if you're just planting something new, you want their water recommendations are going to be for established plantings. So when you're just starting out, you want to kind of keep your eye on the plant, make sure if it's wilting, yeah, give it more water.
Okay.
So their recommendations are going to be for established plantings, just to keep that in mind.
I know we could talk all day. There's so much, you have so much knowledge. Laura, thank you so much. I'm sorry that's all the time we have. Thank you.
I gotta talk faster.
No, that was just perfect. We're going to see you next time for Growing Herbs on March 20th. And also, everyone, in March, we're launching a new virtual program, Right Size Your Life and Live Well. And that's with home organizing expert and syndicated columnist Marnie Jameson. So be sure to join us for that. Meanwhile, register for all of our upcoming programs and catch up on the others you missed by going to scng.com/virtual events. You can also check out our YouTube Southern California News Group on YouTube. If you'd like to share your thoughts from today, or if you have additional questions, I'm sure you do, we can always forward them on to Laura. Please email us at events@scng.com. And hey, a final reminder that if you're not a subscriber but want to get in on all the entertainment and information we offer, just give us a call at 877-469-6133. Thank you again, everybody, for your support, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
All
Bye.
right.